Dr. Amanda Blake stood in the main hall of Kepler Station, watching as the most unusual group of students she had ever seen gathered for orientation. The Galactic Learning Institute had finally approved her proposal for the first interspecies educational exchange program, and today marked the beginning of what she hoped would be a historic experiment in cross-species learning. 12 different species had sent their brightest young minds to participate in the program. Amanda had spent months preparing for this moment, studying each species' unique cognitive abilities and designing challenges that would test different types of intelligence. She believed that by bringing together diverse ways of thinking, they could solve problems that had stumped individual species for generations. The most striking student in the group was Zix4471, a young Viridian whose crystalline body caught the station's artificial light and threw it back in prismatic patterns. The Viridians were famous throughout the galaxy for their incredible processing speeds and logical abilities. Their brains were made of living crystal that could perform calculations faster than most computers. ZYX-4471 single quotes S crystal structures pulsed with soft blue light as he processed information about his new surroundings. Standing near the viewing window was Jake Morrison, a human graduate student from Earth who had joined the program as both participant and researcher. At 26, Jake was working on his doctorate in cognitive psychology, studying how different minds approached problem solving. His presence here had raised eyebrows among the galactic academic community. Humans were still relatively new to interstellar civilization, having only made contact with other species 30 years ago. Most galactic citizens viewed them as a curious but unremarkable species. Jake wore simple clothes and carried a worn leather notebook, looking plain compared to the exotic appearances of his fellow students. His brown hair was slightly messy, and his green eyes held a quiet intelligence that most people overlooked. He had fought hard to be accepted into this program, facing skepticism from professors who questioned whether humans belonged among the galaxy's intellectual elite. The other students represented the cream of galactic intelligence. Lyra, a Mindari with pale blue skin and large dark eyes, possessed natural telepathic abilities that allowed her to sense thoughts and emotions. The Mindari were known for their deep understanding of consciousness and mental patterns. She stood gracefully, her head tilted slightly as she listened to the mental chatter of the group. Quantum 9, a Quantari student, resembled a walking geometric puzzle. His body was made of shifting metallic plates that constantly rearranged themselves in complex mathematical patterns. The Quantari had evolved to think in pure mathematics, seeing the universe as an elegant equation waiting to be solved. His species had discovered most of the galaxy's fundamental mathematical principles. A Nexoid named Terminus Alpha observed everything with mechanical precision. His cybernetic body hummed quietly with processing power, and his optical sensors recorded every detail of the gathering. The Nexoid had long ago merged with technology, becoming living computers that could analyze vast amounts of data in seconds. Terminus Alpha's head turned with small mechanical clicks as he cataloged each student's capabilities. Amanda cleared her throat, and the diverse group turned their attention to her. She was a woman in her 40s with graying hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Her simple blue dress and warm smile helped put the nervous students at ease. "Welcome to the Galactic Learning Institute," she began, her voice carrying easily through the hall's advanced acoustics. "You represent the brightest minds from 12 different species, brought together for an unprecedented experiment in collaborative learning. Over the next 6 weeks, you will face challenges designed to test not just your individual abilities, but your capacity to learn from each other." Zix4471's crystal structures brightened as he processed her words. His voice, when he spoke, had a musical quality that came from sound waves passing through his crystalline body. "Dr. Blake, I am honored to represent the Viridian people in this exchange. I have studied the cognitive abilities of other species, and I must say I am particularly curious about the human approach to problem solving." His tone was polite but carried a subtle undertone of superiority. The Viridians were proud of their intellectual achievements, and HFY had been chosen specifically for his exceptional processing speed. His neural scans showed that his brain operated at exactly 200% the speed of an average human brain, a fact he wore like a badge of honor. Jake felt the weight of expectation and skepticism in the room. He had grown used to being underestimated, but it still stung when he heard the subtle dismissal in HFY voice. Other students glanced at him with curiosity, wondering what humans could possibly contribute to such an advanced group. Each species brings unique strengths to this program, Amanda continued, sensing the tension. The Viridians excel at rapid logical processing. The Mindari understand consciousness and emotion. The Quantari see mathematical relationships others miss. The Nexoid can analyze vast datasets instantly, and humans ... She paused, looking at Jake with an encouraging smile. Humans have their own special gifts that we're only beginning to understand. Lyra, the Mindari student, tilted her head toward Jake. Her telepathic abilities allowed her to sense his emotions, and she felt his mixture of determination and uncertainty. Unlike the others, she didn't dismiss him immediately. There was something different about the way his mind worked, patterns she had never encountered before. To demonstrate the diversity of our cognitive approaches, Amanda said, I'd like each of you to solve a simple puzzle. This will help us understand your different thinking styles. She activated a holographic display that showed a three-dimensional maze with multiple levels and moving walls. The goal was to find a path from start to finish, but the maze changed every few seconds, requiring solvers to adapt their strategies quickly. HFY stepped forward first, his crystal body gleaming with confidence. May I demonstrate the Viridian approach? Amanda nodded, and HFY focused on the maze. His crystal structures blazed with intense light as he processed thousands of possible paths per second. Within 30 seconds, he had mapped out the optimal route, accounting for the maze's changing patterns and predicting its future configurations. He moved through the holographic display with precision, solving the puzzle flawlessly. Impressive, Amanda said. 200% processing speed certainly has its advantages. The other students took turns demonstrating their species' approaches. Lyra used her telepathic abilities to sense the maze's underlying patterns, feeling the emotional resonance of different paths. Quantum 9 reduced the maze to mathematical equations, solving it through pure calculation. Terminus Alpha analyzed the maze like a computer program. Finding the most efficient algorithm, when Jake's turn came, he approached the maze differently. Instead of immediately trying to calculate the optimal path, he stood back and observed the maze's overall behavior. He watched how the walls moved, looking for rhythms and patterns that went beyond pure logic. He noticed that the maze seemed to follow certain preferences in its changes, almost like it had a personality. The maze feels playful, Jake said, surprising the other students. It's not just random, it likes to create certain types of challenges. ZYX-4471 Crystals dimmed slightly. Feelings are not relevant to problem solving, only logic and calculation matter. Jake smiled gently. Maybe, but I think this maze wants to be solved in a particular way. He began moving through the maze, not with the mechanical precision of ZYX-4471, but with an intuitive sense of where to go. When he reached dead ends, he didn't recalculate like a computer. Instead, he paused, closed his eyes for a moment, and seemed to feel his way to the next path. His movements looked almost like a dance, guided by instinct rather than pure logic. To everyone's surprise, Jake solved the maze in about the same time as the others, but his path was different. Where they had found mathematically optimal routes, Jake had found a path that seemed to flow naturally with the maze's changing patterns. His solution was elegant in a way that pure calculation couldn't explain. Amanda watched with growing interest. Jake's approach confirmed her theories about human cognitive abilities. While humans might not process information as quickly as other species, they had developed unique ways of understanding patterns and relationships that went beyond pure logic. Excellent work, everyone, Amanda said. This demonstration shows exactly why this program is so important. Each species sees problems differently, and by combining our approaches, we can find solutions that none of us could discover alone. As the students dispersed to explore their new living quarters, Zix4471 approached Jake with curiosity. Your method was unconventional. How did you know which path to take without calculating all possibilities? Jake shrugged, looking slightly embarrassed. I'm not sure I can explain it. It just felt right. Like the maze was trying to tell me something. Zix4471's crystals pulsed with confusion. His species had always believed that faster processing and superior logic were the keys to intelligence. The idea that someone could solve problems by feeling them challenged everything he had been taught about cognitive superiority. The next morning, Dr. Amanda Blake gathered all 12 students in the Institute's main learning center. The room buzzed with nervous energy as students from different species prepared for their first major challenge. Large holographic displays lined the walls, ready to present the puzzles that would test their cognitive abilities. Today we begin the formal competition, Amanda announced, her voice carrying across the room. You will face a series of puzzles designed to challenge different types of thinking. Each puzzle will test specific skills like pattern recognition, spatial reasoning, mathematical calculation, and abstract thinking. The goal is not just to win, but to learn from each other's approaches. Jake Morrison sat quietly in the back, observing his fellow students. He had spent the previous evening walking through the station's observation deck, thinking about the maze demonstration. The way the other students had looked at him afterward made him both proud and nervous. He knew he had surprised them, but he also knew that real challenges lay ahead. ZYX4471 stood near the front of the group, his crystalline body gleaming with confidence. His crystal structures pulsed with soft blue light as he processed the morning's information. He had spent the night analyzing the maze puzzle, trying to understand Jake's unconventional approach. Despite his confusion about the human's methods, he remained certain that superior processing speed would dominate the upcoming challenges. The first puzzle is called the Symbol Storm, Amanda said, activating the main display. You will see a series of symbols that appear and disappear quickly. Your task is to identify the underlying pattern and predict which symbols will appear next. You have 1 minute to study the sequence, then you must provide your answer. The display came alive with swirling symbols from dozens of different alien languages and mathematical systems. Shapes, numbers, letters, and abstract designs flashed across the screen at high speed. The symbols seemed random at first, but Jake could sense there was a deeper pattern hidden within the chaos. Zix4471 stepped forward first, his crystal brain structures blazing with intense light. The beautiful patterns within his body reflected his thought processes as he analyzed thousands of symbol combinations per second. His processing speed was remarkable to watch data flowed through his crystalline neural networks like light through fiber optic cables. I have identified 17 distinct pattern layers, ZYX4471 announced confidently. The sequence follows a mathematical progression based on prime numbers, combined with linguistic patterns from ancient Viridian texts. The next symbols will be... He proceeded to list 15 symbols in exact order. When Amanda checked his answer against the puzzle's solution, he was completely correct. The other students looked impressed, and some seemed discouraged by the display of pure computational power. Lyra, the Mindari student, approached the puzzle next. Instead of analyzing the symbols mathematically, she closed her large dark eyes and extended her telepathic senses. She tried to feel the emotional resonance of the symbols, searching for patterns that existed beyond pure logic. The symbols carry emotional weight, she said softly. Some feel happy, others sad, some angry. The pattern follows emotional states, rather than mathematical rules. The next symbols will represent hope, fear, and joy. Her approach was completely different from ZYX4471's, but when Amanda checked her answer, she was also correct. The puzzle had multiple layers, and Lyra had found the emotional pattern that ZYX4471 had missed. Quantum-9. The Quantari student reduced the entire display to mathematical equations. His metallic body shifted into complex geometric patterns as he processed the data. He found yet another pattern based on geometric relationships and spatial mathematics. Terminus alpha, the nexoid, analyzed the symbols like a computer program, finding algorithmic patterns that the others had overlooked. Each student found different, correct answers because the puzzle was designed to have multiple solutions. Amanda smiled as she watched their diverse approaches reveal the complexity hidden within the symbol storm. When Jake's turn came, he stood before the display with his hands clasped behind his back. He didn't try to calculate like ZYX4471 or feel emotions like Lyra. Instead, he let his mind wander, thinking about how the symbols reminded him of things from his childhood. Some looked like clouds he had watched as a boy. Others reminded him of music his mother used to play. "The symbols are telling a story," Jake said finally. "Not a mathematical story or an emotional story, but a story about time and memory. They show how things change but also stay the same. The next symbols will be..." He gave his answer, and Amanda's eyes widened with surprise. Jake had found yet another pattern that none of the other students had discovered. His answer was correct, but his approach was completely unique. ZYX-4471 single quotes S. Crystal structures dimmed slightly as he processed this unexpected result. "How did you identify a pattern without proper analysis?" "Your brain processes information much slower than mine," Jake shrugged, looking a bit embarrassed. "I'm not sure. The symbols just reminded me of things, and when I put those memories together, they formed a pattern. It's hard to explain." Competition continued throughout the day, with increasingly difficult puzzles. There were spatial reasoning challenges where students had to manipulate three-dimensional objects in their minds, mathematical puzzles that required complex calculations, logic problems that tested deductive reasoning, abstract challenges that had no clear rules. ZYX-4471 dominated most of the mathematical and logical puzzles. His processing speed gave him a huge advantage when pure calculation was required. He solved equations in seconds that took other students minutes to work through. His confidence grew with each victory, and he began to make subtle comments about the superiority of Viridian cognitive abilities. "Speed and accuracy are the foundations of intelligence," he told the group during a break. "The faster you can process information, the better your solutions will be. This is why Viridian minds are considered the most advanced in the galaxy." Some students nodded in agreement, impressed by his consistent performance. Others looked discouraged, feeling that they couldn't compete with such raw processing power, but Jake continued to surprise everyone. While he rarely won the purely mathematical challenges, he excelled at puzzles that required creative thinking or pattern recognition. He found solutions that no one else had considered, approaching problems from angles that seemed impossible. In one challenge, students had to find the connection between seemingly unrelated images. ZYX-4471 analyzed the images pixel by pixel, searching for mathematical relationships. Jake looked at the images and said they reminded him of seasons changing, of how his grandmother's garden looked different throughout the year. His answer revealed a temporal pattern that the mathematical analysis had missed. During a spatial reasoning puzzle, Jake closed his eyes and moved his hands as if he were sculpting clay. He said he was feeling the shape of the problem rather than calculating it. His solution was elegant and correct, but completely different from the geometric approaches used by other students. Lyra, the Mindari student, began to pay special attention to Jake's methods. Her telepathic abilities allowed her to sense the way his mind worked, and she found it fascinating. While other students thought in straight lines, mathematical, logical, or emotional, Jake's thoughts moved in spirals, connecting ideas in unexpected ways. "Your thinking is very different," she told him after one particularly challenging puzzle. "Most minds follow predictable patterns, but yours jumps between ideas like a butterfly in a garden. It's beautiful to observe." Jake smiled gratefully. "Sometimes I feel like I'm just guessing, but the guesses usually feel right somehow." As the day progressed, ZYX-4471 began to notice something troubling. While he won most individual challenges, Jake's unusual approaches were revealing solutions that pure logic missed. The human wasn't faster or more accurate in traditional terms, but he was finding answers that no one else could see. During the final challenge of the day, students faced a puzzle that combined all the previous elements: symbols, mathematics, spatial reasoning, and abstract thinking. It was designed to be nearly impossible. Requiring multiple types of intelligence working together, Zix4471 attacked the puzzle with his usual systematic approach, processing thousands of possibilities per second. His crystal brain blazed with intense light as he worked through every logical combination. But after 20 minutes, he had made no progress. The puzzle seemed to resist pure logical analysis. Other students tried their specialized approaches with similar results. The Quantari student reduced it to equations but couldn't solve them. The Mindari student sensed confusion and frustration but no clear emotional pattern. The Nexoid's computational analysis revealed only chaos. Jake sat quietly for 10 minutes, just staring at the puzzle. Then he stood up and began to move around the room, looking at the puzzle from different angles. He seemed to be listening to something that no one else could hear. "It's like a song," he said softly. "All the parts are trying to harmonize, but they're out of tune. If I can find the right rhythm. He began making adjustments to the puzzle, not through calculation but through intuition. Each change seemed random to the other students, but Jake was following some inner sense of rightness. The morning of the final challenge arrived with unusual tension in the air. Dr. Amanda Blake had spent the night making final preparations for what she knew would be the most important test of the entire exchange program. The puzzle she was about to present had been the Institute's greatest mystery for over 50 years, and no one had ever come close to solving it. Jake Morrison entered the Learning Center, feeling a mixture of excitement and nervousness. The previous day's challenges had surprised him as much as anyone else. He still didn't fully understand how his mind worked or why his intuitive approach seemed to find solutions that pure logic missed. But he had learned to trust the feelings that guided him through problems, even when they didn't make logical sense. Zix4471 arrived early, his crystalline body gleaming with determined light. He had spent the entire night analyzing Jake's problem-solving methods, trying to understand how the human found patterns that escaped mathematical analysis. The experience had been deeply unsettling for the young Viridian, who had always believed that superior processing speed was the ultimate measure of intelligence. Despite his confusion about Jake's methods, ZYX4471 remained confident that today's final challenge would prove Viridian superiority. Whatever puzzle Dr. Blake presented, he would solve it faster and more accurately than any other student. His crystal brain structures pulsed with renewed determination as he prepared to demonstrate the full power of his cognitive abilities. The other students gathered in the Learning Center, each carrying the weight of their species' expectations. Lyra, the Mindari, sensed the emotional tension in the room through her telepathic abilities. Quantum Nine's metallic body shifted into complex geometric patterns that reflected his mathematical anxiety. Terminus Alpha recorded everything with mechanical precision, his optical sensors analyzing each student's behavior. Amanda stood before the assembled group, her expression more serious than usual. "Today you will face the harmony paradox," she announced. "This puzzle has challenged the greatest minds in the galaxy for decades. Entire research teams have spent years trying to solve it, but no one has ever succeeded." She activated the main holographic display, and the room filled with gasps of amazement. The harmony paradox was unlike anything the students had seen before. It appeared as a massive three-dimensional structure floating in space, constantly shifting and changing. Geometric patterns flowed across its surface like living things, while colors moved through the structure in waves that seemed to follow musical rhythms. The puzzle was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Mathematical equations floated around its edges, but they changed faster than anyone could read them. The structure itself seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting in patterns that suggested consciousness rather than mere calculation. "The goal is simple," Amanda continued. You must find a configuration that brings all elements into harmony. Every pattern must align, every color must flow correctly, and every mathematical relationship must be satisfied simultaneously. The puzzle appears to test every type of intelligence we know about, but something more seems to be required. Jake stared at the harmony paradox with growing wonder. Unlike the previous challenges, this puzzle didn't remind him of anything from his past. It was completely alien yet somehow familiar. The patterns seemed to pulse with a rhythm that he could almost feel in his chest. Like a heartbeat or distant music, ZYX4471 stepped forward with his usual confidence, though his crystal structures flickered slightly with uncertainty. "I request permission to attempt the puzzle first," he said, his musical voice carrying forced assurance. Amanda nodded, and ZYX4471 focused his full attention on the harmony paradox. His crystalline brain blazed with intense light as he began processing the puzzle's complexity. Thousands of calculations flowed through his neural networks every second, creating beautiful light patterns that reflected his thought processes. For 2 hours, ZYX4471 worked with incredible intensity. He analyzed every mathematical relationship, calculated millions of possible configurations, and processed the geometric patterns with systematic precision. His processing speed was truly remarkable. Data flowed through his mind like light through crystal, faster than any biological brain could match. But as time passed, the puzzle seemed to grow more complex rather than simpler. Each solution ZYX4471 attempted created new variables and constraints. The mathematical relationships shifted faster than he could track them. The geometric patterns refused to stabilize under logical analysis. His confidence began to crack as he realized that pure computational power wasn't enough. "This is impossible," ZYX4471 finally said, his crystal structures dimming with frustration. "The puzzle violates basic principles of logic. It creates contradictions that cannot be resolved through mathematical analysis. No rational mind could solve this." Lyra, the Mindari student, approached the puzzle next. She closed her large dark eyes and extended her telepathic senses, trying to feel the emotional resonance of the structure. Her species had always believed that consciousness itself was the key to understanding complex problems. "I can sense something," she said softly. "The puzzle has a presence, almost like a living mind. It's not just a mathematical problem, it's trying to communicate something. But the message is too complex for me to understand. It's like trying to read a book written in a language that doesn't exist yet." After an hour of telepathic exploration, Lyra stepped back with a frustrated expression. "I can feel that there's meaning in the puzzle, but I cannot reach it. The patterns exist beyond the emotional realm that my species understands." Quantum 9 and Terminus Alpha attempted their own approaches with similar results. The Quantari student reduced the puzzle to pure mathematics, but the equations became increasingly complex and contradictory. The Nexoid analyzed it like a computer program, but the algorithms seemed to rewrite themselves faster than his processing could follow, one by one. Each student tried their species' specialized approach. The results were always the same: initial progress followed by increasing complexity and ultimate failure. The harmony paradox seemed designed to resist every type of conventional intelligence. No matter how advanced or specialized. As the day wore on, the students grew frustrated and discouraged. Some began to question whether the puzzle was actually solvable at all. Perhaps it was just an elaborate test of persistence, designed to humble even the galaxy's greatest minds. Jake had been watching quietly throughout the day, observing not just the puzzle, but the way each student approached it. He noticed that everyone tried to impose their species' cognitive framework on the problem, forcing it to fit their particular type of intelligence. But the puzzle seemed to reject every attempt at categorization or systematic analysis. When his turn finally came, Jake approached the harmony paradox with a completely different mindset. Instead of trying to solve it immediately, he simply stood before the holographic display and watched. He didn't attempt to calculate or analyze or feel emotions. He just observed, letting his mind remain open and receptive. The puzzle's patterns began to speak to him in ways that defied explanation. The flowing colors reminded him of sunrise over mountains, of the way light moved through water, of the feelings he had experienced during moments of perfect peace in his life. The geometric shapes seemed to dance with a rhythm that matched his own heartbeat. "It's not trying to be solved," Jake said quietly. "It's trying to be understood. There's a difference." ZYX-4471 single quotes S crystal structures pulsed with confusion. Understanding and solving are the same thing. If you understand a problem's structure, you can calculate the solution. Jake shook his head gently. Maybe for some problems. But this one feels different. It's like ... like it's alive. And you can't solve something that's alive. You can only learn to dance with it. The other students looked at him with expressions ranging from confusion to dismissal. The idea that a puzzle could be alive, that it might require dancing rather than calculating, seemed absurd to their logical minds, but Jake had already begun to move around the holographic display, looking at the harmony paradox from different angles. His movements were slow and thoughtful, almost meditative. He wasn't trying to analyze the puzzle's structure. He was trying to feel its personality, to understand what it wanted to become. "Every living thing has a natural state of harmony," Jake continued, his voice taking on a distant quality. "Animals know when they're in balance with their environment. Plants grow toward the light in ways that can't be calculated. Maybe this puzzle is the same way. Maybe it knows how to be harmonious, but it needs someone to listen to what it's trying to say." Amanda Blake watched with growing excitement as Jake began to interact with the puzzle in ways that no one had ever attempted. Instead of trying to force solutions, he seemed to be having a conversation with the structure itself. His approach was so different from everything they had tried that it might just be crazy. "Enough to work," ZYX-4471 observed Jake's strange behavior with increasing unease. The human's methods made no logical sense, yet there was something compelling about his approach. The puzzle did seem to respond differently to Jake's presence, its patterns flowing with slightly more coherence when he moved around it. Jake Morrison stood quietly before the harmony paradox, feeling its strange presence wash over him like waves on a distant shore. The other students watched with growing amazement as the puzzle continued to respond to his approach in ways they had never seen before. Colors flowed more smoothly across its surface, and the geometric patterns seemed to pulse with a gentler rhythm. While his fellow students had spent hours attacking the puzzle with pure computational force, Jake had discovered something completely different. The harmony paradox wasn't a problem to be solved through calculation. It was more like a living thing that needed to be understood, comforted, and guided toward its natural state of balance. "I can feel what it wants," Jake said softly, his eyes still closed as he moved slowly around the holographic display. "It's been trying to tell everyone the same thing for 50 years, but nobody has been listening in the right way. Everyone keeps trying to force it into mathematical patterns, but that's not how it works." ZYX-4471's crystal structures flickered with confusion and frustration. His brain had processed millions of calculations in an attempt to solve the puzzle. Yet this human was making progress through methods that seemed completely unscientific. "This makes no logical sense," he protested. "Puzzles are solved through systematic analysis, not through feelings and intuition." But even as ZYX-4471 spoke, he could see that Jake's approach was working. The chaotic elements within the harmony paradox were slowly organizing themselves into more coherent patterns. The mathematical equations floating around its edges were beginning to stabilize. The geometric shapes were finding rhythm and purpose in their movements. Dr. Amanda Blake watched with growing excitement as her theory about human cognitive abilities played out before her eyes. Jake was demonstrating a type of intelligence that went beyond processing speed or logical analysis. He was showing the galaxy that some problems required empathy, intuition, and emotional understanding rather than pure computational power. Jake opened his eyes and looked at the puzzle with a gentle expression, as if he were comforting a frightened child. "You've been alone for so long," he said to the structure. All these brilliant minds trying to solve you, but nobody taking the time to understand what you actually need. You don't want to be conquered or calculated, you want to be heard. Lyra. The Mindari student extended her telepathic senses toward Jake, trying to understand how his mind was working. What she felt amazed her. While other students thought in straight lines of logic or emotion, Jake's consciousness moved in spirals and curves, connecting ideas in ways that seemed impossible. His thoughts felt like music made of memories, emotions translated into understanding. Your thinking is unlike anything I have ever encountered, Lyra said with wonder. Most minds follow predictable patterns, but yours creates connections that shouldn't exist. You are not just thinking about the puzzle, you are feeling with it, as if you and it are part of the same song. Jake smiled at her words. That's exactly what it feels like. The puzzle isn't separate from us. It's trying to show us something about harmony itself, not just mathematical harmony, but the kind of balance that exists in nature, in relationships, in music, in life. He began to move his hands in the air around the holographic display, not touching the controls, but somehow influencing the puzzle through gestures that looked almost like conducting an orchestra. Each movement seemed to encourage different parts of the structure to find their natural places in the overall pattern. Quantum Nine's metallic body shifted into complex geometric forms as he tried to understand Jake's methods through mathematical analysis. There is no logical relationship between your hand movements and the puzzle's responses, he said with mechanical precision. The changes appear to follow no mathematical law that I can identify. Maybe that's the point, Jake replied without breaking his concentration. Maybe some things can't be understood through mathematics alone. Maybe there are patterns in the universe that can only be felt, not calculated. As Jake continued his strange dance around the harmony paradox, the puzzle began to transform more dramatically. The flowing colors started to harmonize like instruments in a symphony. The geometric shapes found rhythms that complemented each other. The mathematical equations began to resolve into elegant simplicities rather than complex contradictions. Terminus Alpha, the Nexoid student, recorded every detail of Jake's approach with mechanical fascination. His cybernetic brain analyzed the human's movements, voice patterns, and biometric readings, searching for some logical explanation for what was happening. But his data revealed only impossibilities. The puzzle was responding to factors that his sensors couldn't measure. My analysis indicates that you are influencing the puzzle through means that do not register on any scientific instrument. Terminus Alpha reported, the changes appear to correlate with unmeasurable variables that exist outside the realm of logical computation. Jake paused in his movements and looked at the mechanical student with understanding eyes. Maybe the most important things can't be measured by instruments? Maybe consciousness itself creates connections that go beyond what machines can detect. Zix 4471 watched these exchanges with growing unease. Everything he had been taught about intelligence and problem-solving was being challenged by Jake's success. The Viridian had always believed that faster processing and superior logic were the foundations of all intelligence. But Jake was solving an impossible puzzle through methods that made no computational sense. I do not understand how this is possible, ZYX4471 admitted, his musical voice carrying notes of confusion and frustration. My brain processes information 200% faster than yours. I can perform calculations that would take your mind hours to complete. Yet you are succeeding where I have failed. How can intuition and emotion be more powerful than logic and speed? Jake stopped his movements and turned to face the troubled Viridian. His expression was kind and patient, without any trace of superiority or mockery. It's not about one approach being better than another, he said gently. Your ability to process information quickly is amazing, and it's perfect for many types of problems. But this puzzle needs something different. It needs understanding that comes from the heart as much as the head. He gestured toward the harmony paradox, which was now displaying patterns of increasing beauty and coherence. Look at what's happening to it. The puzzle isn't being forced into a solution, it's finding its own natural harmony. Sometimes the best way to help something is not to control it, but to listen to what it needs and support it in becoming what it's meant to be. Zix 4471's crystal structures pulsed with deep contemplation. For the first time in his life, he was encountering a form of intelligence that his species' philosophy couldn't explain or categorize. Jake's approach challenged everything the Viridians believed about cognitive superiority. But how do you know what the puzzle needs? ZYX 4471 asked. Without logical analysis, without mathematical calculation, how can you determine the correct approach? Jake closed his eyes again and placed his hand near the holographic display, not touching it but somehow connecting with its presence. I think about my grandmother, he said softly. She used to have a garden that struggled to grow. Other people told her to use more fertilizer, to calculate the perfect amounts of water and sunlight. But she just spent time with the plants, talking to them, feeling what they needed. Her garden became the most beautiful one in the neighborhood. He opened his eyes and looked at Zix 4471 with gentle wisdom. She taught me that sometimes you don't solve problems by thinking harder about them. Sometimes you solve them by caring more deeply about them. The puzzle has been trying to tell us something about harmony for 50 years. Maybe it just needed someone to care enough to listen. As Jake spoke, the harmony paradox continued to transform. Its chaotic patterns were resolving into something that looked almost like a living mandala, with colors and shapes flowing in perfect synchronization. The mathematical equations had simplified into elegant expressions of natural relationships. The geometric forms moved with the grace of a cosmic dance. The other students watched in stunned silence as the impossible puzzle responded to Jake's intuitive touch. Some felt inspired by his success, while others struggled to accept that their advanced cognitive abilities had been surpassed by simple human empathy and understanding. Amanda Blake observed the scene with profound satisfaction. Her theories about human consciousness were being validated in the most dramatic way possible. Jake was demonstrating that intelligence wasn't just about processing speed or logical analysis. True intelligence, she realized, included the ability to perceive patterns that existed in the realms of emotion, intuition, and spiritual connection. You're almost there, Amanda said encouragingly. The puzzle is responding beautifully to your approach. Trust your instincts and help it find the final harmony it's been seeking. Jake nodded and returned his full attention to the harmony paradox. He could feel that the solution was very close now. The puzzle had been transformed from a chaotic collection of contradictions into something that pulsed with life and purpose. All that remained was to help it take the final step into perfect harmony. Jake Morrison stood before the harmony paradox, feeling the weight of 50 years of failure pressing down on him. The puzzle pulsed gently with patterns that were almost, but not quite, in perfect harmony. He could sense that the solution was within reach, but he also knew that this final step would be the most difficult of all. The other students watched in tense silence as Jake closed his eyes and extended his awareness toward the puzzle. He pushed aside his doubts and fears, focusing instead on the feeling of connection he had developed with the strange structure. The harmony paradox had become like an old friend to him, and he could sense its eagerness to finally achieve the balance it had been seeking for so long. Almost there, Jake whispered, more to the puzzle than to the watching students. I can feel how much you want this. We just need to find that last piece, that final note that brings everything together. Zix 4471's crystal structures flickered with nervous energy as he watched the human work. Despite his confusion about Jake's methods, the Viridian found himself hoping that the human would succeed. The experience had already challenged everything he believed about intelligence, and he was beginning to understand that there might be forms of consciousness that his species had never imagined. Jake began to move again, his gestures becoming more fluid and purposeful. But instead of trying to manipulate the puzzle directly, he seemed to be encouraging it to find its own way to harmony. His movements were like those of a conductor helping an orchestra discover the perfect tempo, or a teacher guiding a student toward understanding without simply giving them the answer. You know what you need to become? Jake said softly to the puzzle. You've always known. You just needed someone to believe in you, to trust that you could find your own way to balance. As he spoke, something magical began to happen. The harmony. Paradox started to change more rapidly, but the changes felt natural rather than forced. Colors flowed like water finding its course down a mountain. Geometric shapes moved with the grace of birds in flight. Mathematical equations resolved themselves into expressions of simple, elegant truth. Lyra gasped as her telepathic senses detected the change. Something is happening, she said with wonder. The puzzle's presence is transforming. It feels joyful, as if it's finally becoming what it was always meant to be. Jake smiled without opening his eyes. He could feel it too, the puzzle's happiness as it approached the harmony it had been seeking for decades. That's right, he encouraged. Let yourself become what you've always wanted to be. Don't worry about what anyone expects. Just be yourself. Suddenly, Jake's hands moved in one final, decisive gesture. It wasn't a calculation or a manipulation, it was more like a blessing, a gentle push that helped the puzzle take its last step toward perfect balance. The harmony paradox exploded into brilliant light and sound, but not with the chaos of destruction. Instead, it burst with the joy of completion, like a symphony reaching its perfect crescendo. The holographic structure transformed into something so beautiful that several students gasped in amazement at all the chaotic elements that had frustrated. The galaxy's greatest minds for 50 years had resolved into perfect harmony. Colors flowed in patterns that seemed to tell stories of cosmic beauty. Geometric shapes danced with mathematical precision while maintaining organic grace. The equations floating around the structure had become simple expressions of universal truths about balance and connection. The room filled with a gentle, musical hum as the harmony paradox achieved the state it had been seeking all along. The sound was not just heard but felt, resonating in the consciousness of everyone present. It was the sound of perfect balance, of all things finding their proper place in the cosmic order. Dr. Amanda Blake stared at the transformed puzzle with tears in her eyes. After decades of research into consciousness and problem-solving, she was witnessing something that exceeded her wildest theories. Jake had not just solved an impossible puzzle, he had helped it evolve into something transcendent. Incredible, she whispered, absolutely incredible. The harmony paradox wasn't just a puzzle at all. It was a test of our ability to recognize consciousness in forms we don't understand. It was waiting for someone who could see it as a living entity rather than a mechanical problem. The other students stood in stunned silence, trying to process what they had witnessed. Quantum Nine's metallic body had stopped shifting into mathematical patterns and stood perfectly still. Terminus Alpha's optical sensors recorded everything, but his analysis program seemed unable to categorize what had happened. Even the most advanced species in the galaxy had no framework for understanding Jake's achievement. ZYX4471 approached Jake slowly, his crystal structures pulsing with a mixture of amazement and humility. For the first time since arriving at the station, the young Viridian looked uncertain rather than confident. His entire worldview had been challenged by what he had witnessed. I do not understand how you did this, ZYX4471 said, his musical voice carrying notes of genuine respect. My brain processes information 200% faster than yours. I can perform calculations that should give me every advantage in solving complex problems. Yet you succeeded where I failed completely. How is this possible? Jake opened his eyes and looked at the Viridian with gentle understanding. There was no triumph in his expression, no sense of superiority over his fellow students. Instead, he seemed almost surprised by his own success. I think, Jake said slowly, that some problems can't be solved by thinking faster or calculating harder. This puzzle needed something different. It needed someone to recognize that it was alive, that it had feelings and desires of its own. It needed empathy and understanding, not analysis and computation. He gestured toward the transformed harmony paradox, which continued to pulse with beautiful patterns of light and sound. Your ability to process information quickly is amazing. And there are probably thousands of problems where that skill would be perfect, but this puzzle was different. It was lonely and misunderstood. It needed someone to listen to what it was really trying to say. ZYX-4471 single quotes S crystal structures dimmed as he contemplated Jake's words. Are you saying that there are types of intelligence that cannot be measured by processing speed or logical capability? I think so, Jake replied. My grandmother always said that the smartest person isn't always the one who thinks the fastest. Sometimes it's the one who thinks the most deeply, or who cares the most about understanding. Maybe intelligence comes in more forms than we realize. Lyra stepped forward, her telepathic abilities still sensing the joy radiating from the solved puzzle. The human is right, she said softly. I can feel the puzzle's happiness. It is like a creature that has been trapped for decades and is finally free to express its true nature. It was never meant to be conquered through force or calculation. It needed to be loved into wholeness. Amanda Blake nodded with profound satisfaction. This is exactly what I hoped this exchange program would reveal. Each species brings unique gifts to the galaxy, but we've been too focused on ranking different types of intelligence instead of celebrating their diversity. Jake's success shows us that human consciousness offers something precious, the ability to perceive and connect with other forms of awareness in ways that pure logic cannot achieve. She looked around at all the students with enthusiasm. This changes everything. We need to redesign our educational systems, our problem-solving approaches, our entire understanding of what it means to be intelligent. Jake has shown us that some of the universe's greatest mysteries might be solved not through competition between different cognitive approaches, but through cooperation and understanding. Quantum Nine's body shifted into new geometric patterns as he processed this revelation. If this is true, then many problems that our species have declared unsolvable might simply require different approaches than we have attempted. Exactly, Amanda said. Think of all the challenges facing our galactic civilization, conflicts between species, environmental problems, philosophical questions about consciousness and meaning. Maybe we've been trying to solve them with the wrong tools. Maybe we need more approaches like Jake's, which emphasize connection and understanding over dominance and calculation. Jake felt overwhelmed by the implications of what had happened. He had come to this program hoping to prove that humans deserved respect among the galaxy's intellectual elite. But the experience had taught him something much more important, that intelligence wasn't about proving superiority over others, but about finding ways to understand and connect with different forms of consciousness. I learned something important. Today, too, Jake said to the group. I learned that my way of thinking isn't better than yours, it's just different. ZYX4471, your processing speed is incredible, and there are problems where that ability would be perfect. Lyra, your telepathic insights reveal patterns that I could never see. All of our approaches have value. He looked at the harmony paradox, which continued to pulse with gentle contentment. The puzzle taught me that harmony isn't about one voice singing louder than the others. It's about all voices finding ways to sing together, each contributing their unique sounds to create something beautiful. ZYX4471 approached Jake and extended one crystalline hand in a gesture of friendship.